In today's Hollywood-driven entertainment climate, everybody wants action figures and toys based on their movie property. And a lot of movie properties really lend themselves to toys. But what's interesting is not every toy property or toy line developed from a movie is always successful. And what I specifically want to address in this video is a term I hear thrown around a lot in the toy industry. And it really comes from when people are watching a movie in the sort of at the end of the process, as opposed to reading the script, and they'll make a comment and say, "Oh, this movie was just made to sell toys," or "This scene was developed specifically just to sell toys." This image of Batman fighting a shark with a lightsaber tends to be a sort of fan reaction to that sentiment. That sometimes merchandise tends to drive storytelling. Now, what I want to say is that really a bad thing? Is it bad if movies are written to sell toys? Well, the short answer is yes and no. Gee, how is that for evading the subject? So, what I want to talk about is the idea of toys that come from entertainment, that come from movies, tend to get a bad rap sometimes. A lot of people will say, "Oh, that scene was only developed, was only dropped into the movie purely to sell action figures and dolls and playsets and Hot Wheels and board games and whatever." And honestly, that absolutely does happen. There are numerous examples, and I'm definitely going to hit on a couple of them in this video, of scenes that were developed, especially, shall we say, after the fact, post-script, that were created just to sell toys. And I guess the point that I want to make with this video is that's not really the best way to make movies that are going to sell toys, by dropping in these scenes after the fact. It's notorious that this whole tread speeder scene from Episode 9, from Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, was a late addition to the film, and rumor has it that executives talked about this scene specifically being added so they could sell toys, such as this toy here. Now, obviously, it's known that toy sales can absolutely eclipse movie ticket sales. But when you're dropping in scenes into movies just to find ways to turn that scene into a toy, to me, and I'm speaking from being in the toy industry for over 20 years and being on sort of both sides of it, developing scripts, reading scripts, having to translate scripts into toys, I've been very privileged to have gotten to do that. There is a difference between an organic process and kind of a forced process. And that's what I want to talk about specifically, so that we could be developing better toys and better movie content that will lead to better toys. So let's talk about that. For example, this scene from Attack of the Clones, and I'm not trying to pick on Star Wars or anything, they're just obviously a very good example of a toyetic movie, where Padme is running through the conveyor belt. People almost joke that it looked like she was actually in a video game, and that this scene was put in purely to sell toys. Although, relatively speaking, there were actually few toys based on this scene. A better example might be something like the original G.I. Joe movie, where the two lead heroes were put into these kind of RoboCop Buzz Lightyear action suits, which gave them superhuman, abilities to jump and lift and, be more athletic and more agile than a regular average Joe, no pun intended. And it was definitely clear that this was dropped into the movie because of this, because they wanted to be able to sell action figures of it. And again, that's not a bad thing. A big part of what I'm trying to explain in this video is that developing movies with the idea that they're going to work as toys is a good thing. It gets a bad rap with that whole, Batman fighting a great white shark with a lightsaber, because people look at it and say, oh, they're selling out or they're designing that bat suit just to sell toys. A further example specifically from this Batman shot that I'm showing, Batman and Robin, this was Batgirl the girl from Clueless played her. And you could see in the toy that she doesn't have hair flowing out in the back, but in the actual movie, she did have hair, and that was because in the movie they found that the cowl did not fit on her head. Her hair was too big, so they had to remove it. So it's an interesting example of them designing a costume to sell toys that wound up not working in the movie. Here's a counterexample, and a really good one, of showing positive. Toy Story, the original Toy Story. No one in sort of toy world believed in Toy Story as a vehicle to sell product. It was very hard to attract what's called a toy partner for what was an unproven property and an unproven medium. This was essentially the first CGI animated movie, and a lot of folks were wary if this was actually going to work to replace hand-drawn animation. Now, there was a basic toy line. I mean, there were toys from it, but it was relatively small, especially if you fast forward to today with Toy Story 4 that has like 4 or 5 feet of evergreen space in the toy aisle. In fact, one of the long, I guess, not consequences, but results of not many companies really supporting the first line was that Thinkway, which made this Buzz Lightyear, was actually referenced in Toy Story 2, where they actually said on camera, on screen, about toy companies not producing enough Buzz Lightyears to meet demand. And this was true. This was basically, Thinkway was the only company that really stepped up and embraced the property. And because of that, they wound up having almost a lifelong deal with John Lasseter and his company to continue to make Toy Story toys, no matter what other company, be it Hasbro or Mattel, had sub-licenses, even for the mainstream. Thinkway was always given rights to the high-end stuff. Another example is World of Warcraft. This is the boom cannon that was in the film. And the filmmakers really wanted a toy of this. And it was clear that, some like that shot there, that was basically like a still shot to sell toys. But we never did a toy of this. They did toys of other things like the Doom Hammer, other roleplay toys, but not the boom cannon. The reason for that is because pirate guns don't sell. Kids like laser guns. At the end of the day, if you have a laser gun and a pirate gun side by side, kids, especially boys with aggressive boy play, are going to go for the laser guns. Lego Movie. Now, here is sort of the counterpoint example. So this was a movie about, thematically, the idea of not basically be able to create whatever you want and not giving into buying merchandise, yet at the same time in a very sort of, call it, surreal move for a movie that had a sort of very anti-product message. It generated some of the best-selling movie-to-toy product of all time. The Lego movie sets for both movie 1 and 2 were some of Lego's best-selling sets for those years. And many of them represented the sort of the crazy non-set items that were, if you will, built in the movie. Okay, so where am I going with all this? There's basically 2 types of toy movies out there at the end of the day. Sort of 2 strategies, 2 approaches that companies tend to take. The first approach, which unfortunately happens sometimes, is kind of the forced-fed approach, where scripts, after they're developed, scenes are created specifically to try to sell toys that don't necessarily fit into the narrative. The second is what I would call the perfect fit. And this is when the script has toyetic elements from day one. They're not forced into the script. They naturally work with the script. Movie making is a science, but more importantly, toy making is a science, because toys are interactive entertainment. It's not passive play or passive entertainment like watching a film. You're actually manipulating the toy. And understanding how to do this is a lot like, throwing darts at a target. If you want to hit a bullseye, having those toyetic elements in the script from day one and not done as after the fact reshoots or additions help make scripts toyetic. And having what's called toyetic elements in the script from day one not only is going to drive the entertainment value of the movie, but it's going to drive sales. And this kind of brings me back to one of the services that I offer at spectrecreative.com is what we call toyetic film review, a process where we review films, work with the toy companies, work with the studios at the script stage to develop elements in the story that are going to work for toys. Selling toys for a movie is not a bad thing. And when done in the right way at the script stage versus dropping in scenes in reshoots or after the fact is the way to help not guarantee, but let's say highly improve your chances of having a hit toy line to go with your movie. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you thought of the content. Always open to suggestions and feedback. And give me a like or subscribe. I most appreciate it. See you guys around the internet.